Quite a few people have asked me, how was I able to buy a distressed business, an accountancy and bookkeeping firm that had made losses the previous 2 years of cumulative losses of 650k and was in administration? How was I able to buy that, turn it around in 18 months into a profitable business and get a 400% return on my original investment? Well, this series of videos will go into not necessarily what we did right, but what we got wrong, because I think that's where the greatest learnings are. Hope you enjoy the videos. So here's the first learning that we had, something that we got wrong. We had assumed, wrongly as it turned out, that the staff following the purchase of the business would be highly motivated. They weren't. This is largely because the old owner had, in his own inimitable wisdom, had told the staff of the financial troubles of the business, that it'd gone into insolvency and it was up for sale. Well, that's nuts, because all that's going to do is start the hair running, and which is what it did, as it turned out. Some of the good staff had already gone. There were other good remaining staff, but they'd already dusted down their CV and in the process of thinking about other jobs outside of the company they're currently employed by. And to crown it all, the ops director, who is at the centre of things, not the CEO and certainly not the chairman, the former owner, the ops director lasted 20 days. 20 days, despite all her positivity to us before we bought the business. She was off after 3 weeks, and which meant, well, she'd resigned. And of course, once someone has resigned, you're not going to get the best out of them during their notice period. So that immediately meant that my business partner and I, Paul, we had to roll up our sleeves and get involved in the day-to-day running of the business. And that wasn't part of the plan. We weren't investing in the business to create a job for ourselves, but that's what we found we had to do through circumstance. So what would we do differently? I think definitely we'd look at company organisational chart more critically, identify if there was a member of staff or a couple of members of staff where if they departed, exited, stage left, would that be a critical point of failure for the business? If so, what could be done about it? If nothing could be done about it, then don't look at that business to purchase. Move on, let someone else buy it. So that was our first lesson. I guess because we're positive people, we assumed, again, that's that word again, we assumed that everyone else would be positive about us buying the business, and that clearly wasn't the case. And the ops director as well ended up taking half a dozen staff and half a dozen clients with her, because there was no non-compete clause in the employment contracts. So there's another learning. Get all of those sent to you before you purchase the business. Let's see what they're committed to in an employment contract. Wonderful. 2 learnings out of 1 there. Okay, so the second lesson that we learned was all to do with client profitability. Now, we had seen historic accounts before we bought the business, looking at 1.5 to 2 million turnover. However, net margin, net profitability was 3 to 5%. That was the range. Now, we had thought to ourselves, that's because the natural reluctance of many business owners to charge a premium price for a premium service. And it was ostensibly a premium service because it was very high touch, very bespoke. So that was the understanding that we had before we bought the business. I wanted to check, once we'd bought the business, I wanted to check with the directors that we inherited, what is the line by line client profitability, line by line? Who are we making the most money on? Who are we not making the most money on? And therefore with a view to increasing some of the fees to make sure they were commercially attractive to us in terms of what we were charging. Now, you would think, given it was an accountancy and bookkeeping firm, you would think management accounts data would be readily available, wouldn't you? No such luck. They didn't track that sort of information. Don't know why, given their background and their career history, but they didn't. And so had to manufacture it from scratch. Now, I came up with a profitability matrix, a very fancy Excel spreadsheet, and I asked the CEO and the ops director to populate it, given that they were at the coalface and so they knew with their teams who was spending most time on which projects. So to get an idea of really cost versus the fees that we were charging those clients. Now that didn't take 2 weeks, that took 2 months for them to come up with something that was workable and something that we could look at meaningfully. And we were shocked by the outcome, which was of the 40 clients that we'd had in the business, over half of them were loss makers, making no money at all. And yet we're providing a bespoke service, individual service, a tailored service, and we weren't making any money on it. Some 20, 30, 40% loss on the fees that we were charging them. Absolutely incredible. No wonder when COVID came and lockdowns came and it was tougher trading conditions that companies like this disappeared. So anyway, we made the decision that we were going to increase fees. Not that palatable given that we were recent owners, but we had no choice. Otherwise the business would go into another insolvency situation, because you can't carry half your client base where you're not making any money. That's just ridiculous. And so that's what we did. We charged the CEO with increasing prices because he had the relationships with the clients. We later discovered that whilst he might have sent out emails, didn't really get agreement from most of the clients about a price increase. We found out eventually why that was. It was to do with customer service issues with about a third of the clients. So it's very difficult if you're not getting the service you expect, and then new owners come in and they're saying, hi, we're going to increase your fees through the CEO. So the CEO had a very difficult job. He ducked it quite a few times. We later discovered, when we did discover that there'd been a ducking the issue, we had to do his job for him and go around with the clients. In fact, my business partner had to speak with all of them in order to clarify the situation and explain why we were having to increase the fees. And most of them took it. Some didn't and went elsewhere, but you can't run a business with loss-making clients. Sometimes you give them the option of absorbing the price increase, or you just have to let them go. That's the commercial reality. So that was fundamental in one of the reasons why we got the business back into profitability, was doing something about the loss-making clients and understanding the key numbers in the business, first of all, which were missing. They just weren't there. In 20 years history, no one had ever bothered to track it. So what would we do next time round? Well, that's an interesting one. During due diligence, I'd probably, normal due diligence with a company that's not in a distressed situation, I would get the owner or their nominated representative as one of the directors to give anonymised client A, client B, what the profitability was. What are they charging, and an estimate of what costs they were absorbing for operating that service. Worth doing. It also would determine whether the current business owner has really got a handle on their numbers or not. And if they haven't, then buyer beware, I guess. Okay, hopefully found that tip useful.